What's up? Nick Hilton here, and in this video, I'm giving you 5 tips to improve your post-processing speed and consistency. All right, tip number 1 is to use Photo Mechanic to cull your images. Why do we use Photo Mechanic instead of Lightroom when we're culling? Well, because Photo Mechanic is just more efficient. You can see in here that we've got all of our JPEG previews of our RAWs. Because of this, there's almost no loading time. I can just open up all of the images from the shoot, click on the first one, and then I just put one finger on number 1 and one finger on the arrow key. Everything that I'm gonna keep gets a 1 star. So I just go through and then I just give a 1 when I see fit. And then when that process is done, I can just filter out the 0-star images, select all of these, and then I can simply click and drag and drop them right in here, the library module inside of Lightroom. Then it'll import everything for me that I selected. And now the reason I use Photo Mechanic instead of Lightroom is because 1, like I said, Photo Mechanic is much more efficient. You get the JPEG preview, so there's virtually no loading time. 2, it just runs faster between images. And 3, if I was importing an entire shoot into Lightroom, then while I'm editing, I'm also thinking about, which images should I keep and which ones I'm not. And then sometimes you edit images that you don't actually want to keep. So this gets you to the point where in Lightroom, all you have is the images that you plan to deliver. Tip number 2 is to start with the best image of each scene. We'll call these our hero images. Now, a scene can be, multiple things. It could be, one scene could be a certain type of environment and a certain type of lighting. And then, another scene would be a different style of lighting and an environment. But also you can break down scenes even further and say you switched shooting directions. That is now a different scene. Or if you changed lenses and one of your lenses interprets color a little bit different than the other one, that would now be a different scene as well. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna select the best image from each scene. And don't take too much time on this. One of the best is fine. So what I'm gonna do is I've already done this. I went through and from this scene, I went ahead and I gave that a 6. And on my Lightroom, the 6 marks it as a red image. So I'm gonna take this image and then I'm gonna go to where I switched directions and then I picked another one of my favorites, which is this image. And that one I marked red as well. Then I can click on the red so that I filter only the red label images. So now I just have these 2 images and I kind of want my entire shoot delivery to match this photo. This is where I want my consistency to match. I don't want to start with the very first photo of the shoot and then start to get into better images and then change the way I'm editing it and then have to go back and redo the other ones. So I'm gonna start with one of my favorite images from the scene. And what I'm gonna do first, go into my develop module, and I am going to, get the exposure correct, and then I will do my white balance adjustment. Let's get that to a proper white balance. And then I will get one of my presets here, adjust the exposure just a little bit. All right, so this is gonna be my base for this entire shoot. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go copy these settings from this image, but I'm not gonna copy the exposure or the white balance. Click copy. Now I'm gonna go to this other scene image and I'm going to get the exposure correct how I want it there. And then I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna adjust that white balance. And then with that selected, I'm gonna click paste. And now we have an image that resembles the first one, even though it's a different scene. And now I'm gonna have to make a couple micro adjustments here. I'm gonna warm it up just a little bit. And then I might drop the highlights just barely for that sky in the back. All right, so that is the end of that step right there. All right, tip number 3 is to use the sync feature inside of Lightroom. The sync feature is going to take the settings from your selected image and then sync those settings exactly to all of the other images that are currently selected. and I'm gonna use those hero images as my starting point. So I'm going to unselect the red filter, and then, I use red instead of a star because I can see the red border around the image. And so what I'm gonna do is have that image selected, shift click everything before it, and then click sync. And I'm gonna make sure that exposure and white balance are checked this time because I haven't adjusted the exposure and white balance on those other images. And then once those are synced, I'm gonna keep this image selected, and then I'm going to go to the end of that scene, and I'm gonna shift click again. So I have all those images selected, but this is still my main image. And then I'm gonna click sync again. All right, now that scene is completely synced. Then I'm gonna go find my red image from the other scene. I'm gonna click on that one. And then same thing, shift click all the images in that scene that are prior, click sync. Then I'm gonna keep that image selected, shift click at the end, sync. All right, everything is synced, and that brings us to tip 4. And tip 4 is to do all of your local adjustments last. This cropping, radial filters, brushes, all that kind of stuff. And now most images, you can probably get away with just cropping and doing some exposure adjustments. So that's what we're gonna focus on here. And a tip for you guys is R brings up your crop, R gets rid of your crop. And then another key shortcut that you should know is that if I click on exposure, the word exposure right here, then it allows me to modify the exposure with the plus or minus key. So minus lowers the exposure and plus raises the exposure. And so when I'm going through, I can say, okay, this one needs a little bit of exposure, bump it with a plus, go to the next one. I'll bump this one up just a touch, click R, and then I will crop that, click R to get rid of it, go to the next one, pull up R again, adjust that crop, and then we just continue this process throughout the shoot. Now, tip number 5 is don't edit 2 cameras at once. If you're shooting a wedding or you're shooting 2 different cameras with 2 different lenses during a shoot, I always like to keep those in separate folders inside of Lightroom, and I will sync all of the settings in one camera first. I'll take the settings from those hero images, apply them to the hero images of the second camera, make my adjustments, and then sync those photos independently. And then you can go through both cameras at once to do your final adjustments. But when you're syncing settings, you don't want to have both cameras intermixed inside of the catalog. And the reason is because different cameras will interpret colors differently. So even though your settings are synced, they still might look distinguishingly different. I don't even know if that's a word, but I'm gonna use it. They might look different. So keep them separate until you're at that point where you're just making those final adjustments, and that'll save you a lot of time. I can't tell you how long I edited weddings with both cameras intermixed, and I would have to get to one camera image and then make the adjustment, and then I would get to go through, and then I would get back to that one, and then I would have to go click on the last image from that other camera and then click previous, and it was a mess. And then also, bonus tip, use the previous button. It's very, very genius. Let's say right here on this image, I wanted to crop it about right there. And then let's say I wanted to add a radial burn so that it's lighter on the child's face. And then I get to the next image and I'm like, okay, I want to do the exact same thing. Well, then I'm just gonna click previous. And previous just does exactly what I did on the photo previously to that one. All right, those are my 5.5 tips on how to improve your post-processing workflow, speed, and consistency. Hopefully this was helpful. And once again, I am Nick Hilton. If you are interested in mastering the art and the business of photography, click the link in the bio and check out Freedom Photographer. We'll see you in the next video.